So I went ahead and bought a capture card of AliExpress, and I bought this one, especially this one, just because it has 60 frames a second output option. This is not the cheapest one. For example, this here is cheaper, but I bought this one because it's 60 frames a second. But the problem is, I noticed it doesn't actually have 60 frames a second output. It only has fake 60 frames a second with duplicate frames. That is actually 30 frames a second. So I commented that, gave it 2 stars because otherwise it's kind of okay. And they required proof. So this is me giving proof of that. So, okay, here I have the output of the card. You can see it's set to 60 frames a second on OBS, and on this screen it's a direct output of the device. The actual device is right here. It's connected to an Orange Pi running Android and this simple app that I created earlier to debug some frame times. So what we can clearly see is we have every millisecond that is the application renders a frame, it prints a white dot there. So you can see all the time there are about 6 white dots or bars visible, because you can imagine in 100 milliseconds there should be 6 frames. So that's simple. There's 60 frames a second and 100 milliseconds, there's 6 frames. Here you can see 6, but here you can only see 3. As additional proof, I captured slow motion video from the screen that the HDMI is directly connected to. Then I used the exact same way to capture video from several pieces of software that are able to read the capture card's output. So here we have the direct output, and if I go to a frame, like this frame for example, you can see that it happened to happen on the 99th millisecond. So if we go to the next frame, it's at the 16th millisecond, which is quite accurately 60 milliseconds, 16.66 milliseconds, which means 60 frames a second. If we go to the next frame, it's at 32, which is close enough to 33, and so on and so on. And you can see then that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 frames. This one 100 milliseconds. So it's quite clear that the application is actually rendering at 60 frames a second. And here is the slow motion footage captured from OBS from the capture card's output in the same way as I captured from the direct output. So here we can see there's like 1, 2, 3. 3 times this 100 milliseconds it outputted a frame. We can see it again. There's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, then let's check. VLC player. You can see that it's set to 60 frames a second with motion JPEG and full HD. It's kind of bad quality, but you should be able to see that. So if I fast forward, you can see there's no hijinks. Then I press another button to set some extra settings. We can see the same thing. There's 1, 2, 3 frames. And then, last but not least, FF Play, which is a a software that is bundled with FFmpeg. FFmpeg is a program, a command line program that is used by tons and tons of software actually under the hood. So you can see I set it to 60 frames a second, and I execute the command. FFplay opens, and we can again see when we go to the next 100 milliseconds. So 1, 2, 3. And the next frame is, yeah, it went over. It wrapped around. So it's no more than 30 frames a second ever.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god, stop fucking lying.
Extra footage. When we look at the direct output and the FFplay output, we can see the delay of the capture card. So we have one frame that hits exactly 90 seconds. And you can see how much behind the capture card is. It is about 160 milliseconds. We can also go to the frame where the capture card shows the 50th second. Here about. And you can see it's about the same,